AITA for canceling Christmas dinner because my husband's Secret Santa gift was for his gaming buddy and not me? Let me paint the full picture for you, so you can truly understand why I am currently hiding in my bedroom with a bottle of wine, debating whether to block my mother-in-law until the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve. To set the stage, I am 28 years old, and my husband, who I will call Chris for the sake of this story, is 30. We have been married for 3 years, and every year since tying the knot, we have hosted Christmas dinner for his family. Hosting is no small feat, especially when his family insists on the works. I am talking about a full 3-course dinner, decorations that rival something out of a Hallmark movie, and a perfectly curated vibe that screams Merry freaking Christmas. Despite the chaos, I have always taken pride in making the holiday magical, even if I do most of the heavy lifting. Chris usually helps a little, but this year, he was too busy. By too busy, I mean he was glued to his gaming console, headset on, shouting into the void at some guy with an online alias like, the Warlord. It was his usual excuse: work had been stressful, and gaming was his way to unwind. Sure, fine. I can understand needing an outlet, but at what point does unwinding become straight-up avoidance? I spent hours decking the halls, stringing up lights, arranging centerpieces, and perfecting the menu while Chris was in the next room yelling things like, push left flank, or whatever gamers yell at each other. I tried to keep my cool, reminding myself that Christmas is about joy and togetherness, or so the cheesy movies say. About a month ago, Chris's family suggested doing a Secret Santa gift exchange to simplify the gift-giving process. We set a $100 budget, and I thought it was a great idea. I was assigned his dad, who is notoriously hard to shop for, but I went above and beyond. After hours of online searches, I managed to track down a vintage vinyl record he had mentioned once in passing. It was a rare find, but I knew it would make him smile, and that made it worth the effort. Chris, on the other hand, drew my name. At first, I was excited. How often does your Secret Santa get to be your own spouse? I assumed this meant I would get something thoughtful, maybe even romantic. After all, he knows me better than anyone else, right? Fast forward to Christmas morning. I had been up since the crack of dawn, prepping everything for the big dinner. The ham was in the oven, the table was set with handmade decorations I had painstakingly crafted, and the house looked like a spread from a lifestyle magazine. As I was arranging gifts under the tree, I noticed an unfamiliar box. It was wrapped sloppily in paper I knew Chris had used for his Secret Santa gift. The tag read, "To the Warlord, from Chris." Now, let me clarify something. I knew the Warlord was one of Chris's online gaming buddies. They play together almost every night, and while I have never been thrilled about how much time Chris spends gaming, I have always tried to be understanding. But this gift piqued my curiosity. Why was he buying a gift for his gaming buddy? And why did it look so much nicer than anything else under the tree? My gut told me something was off, so I opened it. Yes, I snooped. I own that. But what I found floored me. Inside the box was a custom-made gaming headset, complete with a monogram of the Warlord's online tag. It was sleek, high-tech, and clearly expensive. I did a quick search online and discovered that this headset retailed for about $150, well over the Secret Santa budget we had agreed on. My first thought was that Chris had gone overboard with his gift, but then reality hit me like a freight train. If he spent this much on his gaming buddy, what did he get for me, his wife? I felt a pit forming in my stomach, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe there was something amazing waiting for me under the tree. Spoiler alert, there was not. My gift from Chris was a $20 candle. It was the kind you grab at the checkout line of a generic department store. The tag read, "Merry Christmas. Love, Chris." That was it. No thought, no effort, no sign that he knew or cared about my likes or dislikes. I am not even a candle person. In that moment, I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. This was not about the money, it was about what the gifts represented. He had poured time, effort, and extra cash into a gift for his online friend while phoning it in for me, his wife, who had spent weeks making this holiday perfect for him and his family. I confronted him immediately. I held up the candle and asked, "Really? This is what you got me?" He laughed, as if I were being ridiculous, and said, "It's just Secret Santa." You're overthinking it. Besides, the warlord and I have been gaming together for years. You wouldn't get it. Oh, I got it. I got that my husband valued his gaming buddy more than me. I got that he thought it was okay to dismiss my feelings with a laugh and a condescending comment. I got that he did not appreciate the effort I put into making our home and our holidays special. And I was done. I walked back into the kitchen, packed up the food I had spent all morning preparing, and announced that Christmas dinner was cancelled. Chris looked at me like I had just declared war. He started yelling about how I was ruining Christmas and being selfish. His mom and sister started blowing up my phone, calling me petty and accusing me of overreacting. Meanwhile, Chris stormed off to the living room to vent to his gaming friends, probably telling the warlord all about how his crazy wife had ruined the holiday. So here I am, sitting on my bed in my pajamas, sipping wine straight from the bottle while the perfectly glazed ham sits untouched in the fridge. My phone keeps buzzing with angry texts from his family, but I have not responded. I do not feel like I am in the wrong for standing up for myself. I am tired of being the one who puts in all the effort while Chris coasts by, thinking he can do the bare minimum and still come out looking like the good guy. AITA for canceling Christmas dinner? Maybe. But at this point, I do not care. Sometimes, the only way to make a point is to draw a line in the sand, and tonight, that is exactly what I did. Update 1. This morning, I woke up to a quiet, awkward house. Chris had slept on the couch, which was honestly a small mercy. I didn't have the energy, or the patience, to face him yet. The smell of the uneaten ham still lingered in the air, a bittersweet reminder of all the effort I had wasted. But as peaceful as the morning might have seemed on the surface, my phone had other plans. The buzzing had started again, a relentless flood of texts from Chris's family, each notification hammering home the reality that this wasn't over. After letting it buzz on the nightstand for a while, I finally gave in and opened the messages. I had to see just how bad the fallout was. Unsurprisingly, his mom's texts were a treasure trove of passive-aggressive remarks. But what caught my attention were the forwarded messages from his sister. Apparently, while I was busy juggling the chaos of Christmas dinner, Chris had been venting to them about me. He told them I was overly controlling and had ruined the holiday spirit with my perfectionism. Perfectionism? That was rich coming from the guy who couldn't be bothered to help string a single strand of lights. But it didn't stop there. Chris had apparently convinced them that the entire Secret Santa idea was my brainchild, which, for the record, it wasn't. It had been his sister's idea from the start. Yet somehow, I was the villain, the Grinch who stole Christmas by daring to expect basic effort and adherence to a $100 budget. His mom went on about how I take things too seriously, and how I should have just let things slide for the sake of the family. Sure. Because it's my job to swallow my feelings and play hostess to a group of people who clearly have no issue siding with Chris without even asking for my side of the story. Feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion, I decided to channel my energy into cleaning up the kitchen. I was still trying to process everything when I spotted something unusual. Behind the toaster, shoved almost out of sight, was a small wrapped package. It was addressed to me, from Chris. The wrapping looked rushed, the tape barely holding the paper together, as if it had been thrown together in a hurry. My stomach twisted as I opened it, the hope of finding some redeeming gesture slowly fading. Inside was a necklace with a charm shaped like a gaming controller. A gaming controller. I stared at it, disbelief coursing through me. It was the kind of thing you'd expect a teenager to gift their gamer girlfriend, not a grown man to give his wife of 3 years. It wasn't my style, not even close, and it felt like a cheap, lazy afterthought. But the detail that really sealed the deal. The receipt was still in the box, and it was dated yesterday afternoon. He had literally bought this at the last minute, likely when he realized that I might expect something, anything, after seeing the effort he put into the warlord's gift. The hurt I felt in that moment was overwhelming. This wasn't just about the gifts or even about Christmas. This was about the deeper message those gifts sent. It was about how little thought and respect Chris had shown for me, not just as his wife, but as a person. It wasn't just that I was being overlooked, it was that I was being taken for granted, dismissed like my feelings didn't matter. My frustration boiled over into resolve. I decided that I needed space to think, to process, and to figure out what I was going to do next. I packed a bag, quietly grabbing enough clothes for a few days, and told Chris I was going to stay with my sister. His reaction was predictable. "You're being dramatic," he said, barely looking up from his phone. There it was again, the dismissal, the lack of accountability, the refusal to even entertain the possibility that he might be in the wrong. I felt a mix of sadness and anger as I slung the bag over my shoulder and headed for the door. But as I was walking out, something stopped me. Chris's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with a notification. I glanced at it, not intending to snoop, but the name, The Warlord, caught my eye. Beneath it, the message preview read, "Thanks for the headset, babe. Can't wait to try it out tonight." I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach. Babe? The words blurred in my mind, and my hands felt cold as I stood there, staring at the screen. That single message hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a headset. This wasn't just about a thoughtless Christmas. This was something else entirely. Update 2. After seeing that message, I couldn't let it rest. I knew if I didn't dig deeper, the suspicion would eat me alive. So, while I was at my sister's house, nursing a mug of tea that I wasn't even drinking, I decided to start piecing things together. Chris had always been vague about his gaming group, casually throwing around their usernames but never really talking about the people behind them. At the time, I chalked it up to me not being a gamer. He would toss out names like Shadow Sniper, or Pixel King, and I'd smile and nod, assuming it was just a harmless hobby. But now, with that text from The Warlord burned into my brain, I couldn't help but feel there was more to the story. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through old text threads with Chris, trying to jog my memory. A few months ago, he had mentioned his gaming group in passing. I specifically remembered him calling The Warlord super cool. He'd even made some offhand joke about how they were carrying him through life. At the time, I thought it was just gamer slang, something about winning matches or completing missions. But now, with all the context swirling in my head, that comment felt unsettlingly literal. Was this more than just a gaming friendship? I sat there staring at my phone, the uneaten slice of toast on my plate growing cold, trying to figure out my next move. My sister, who had been quietly watching me spiral, finally spoke up. "Look," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you need to figure this out, or it's going to drive you insane. If you can't get answers from Chris, find someone who can give them to you." Her words hit me like a slap of clarity. She was right. If Chris wasn't going to be honest, I had to find someone who would be. So, after some deliberation, I decided to reach out to someone from his gaming group. I knew Chris had mentioned a guy named Dan a few times. From what I remembered, Dan was friendly, the kind of person who might actually answer my questions without brushing me off. I felt a little strange messaging someone I'd never met, but at this point, my curiosity, and my need for answers, outweighed my discomfort. I found Dan on social media through Chris's friends list and sent him a message. I tried to keep it casual at first, framing it like I was just curious about the group dynamic. "Hey, Dan," I wrote. "I know this might be a bit random, but I've heard a lot about you guys from Chris. Just curious, how long have you all been playing together?" I stared at my phone, heart pounding, wondering if I'd made a mistake. To my surprise, Dan replied quickly. His initial response was polite but vague, something along the lines of, "Oh, yeah, we've been playing together for a while. Good group of people." I wasn't satisfied. After a bit of back and forth, I decided to bring up the headset and the "babe" text. I framed it lightly, almost like I was joking. "Funny thing, I saw Chris got The Warlord a fancy headset. Guess she's his favorite, huh? He even got a message calling him babe. Should I be jealous?" Dan's tone shifted immediately. His reply came slower this time, and when it did, it was more cautious. "Wait, he got her that headset? Huh. I mean, yeah, they've been close for a while, but babe? That's weird." My stomach churned as I read his message. Weird wasn't the word I wanted to hear. Weird wasn't reassuring. It was the kind of word that opened doors you didn't want opened. Feeling like I was walking a tightrope, I pushed a little further. "So, who is the Warlord, anyway?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. There was a long pause before Dan responded. When his next message came through, my hand started to shake. "Her name's Amanda," he wrote. "She's, an ex of Chris's. From college, I think. I thought you knew. They reconnected online last year when she joined the group. I always thought it was a little weird he never mentioned it to you, but, not my place to say anything." I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me. Amanda. His ex. The woman he'd dated before me, the one he had only mentioned in passing over the years. And now she wasn't just some distant memory, she was the warlord. The person he spent hours gaming with every night, the one he bought an expensive headset for, the one who called him, babe. My mind raced as I tried to connect the dots, but every piece of the puzzle just made the picture worse. Dan, perhaps sensing my silence, added one last thing. "By the way, that headset thing makes sense now. She's been talking about getting a new one for months. I guess Chris wanted to, help her out." Help her out. Knight in shining armor, swooping in to save the day. For his ex. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I had just learned. It felt surreal, like I had been dropped into the middle of a bad soap opera. How could Chris have thought this was okay? Did he really believe I wouldn't notice, or that I wouldn't care? And why had he kept it a secret for so long? My sister, who had been quietly sitting across the table, noticed the look on my face and asked what had happened. I told her everything, my voice shaky as I recounted what Dan had said. She didn't interrupt, but her expression hardened as I spoke. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said, "Well, that's a whole new level of disrespect." Disrespect didn't even begin to cover it. At this point, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. Update 3. After learning the truth about Amanda, I drove back home with my heart pounding in my chest. Every emotion I could possibly feel, anger, betrayal, sadness, swirled together into a chaotic storm that I couldn't contain. I didn't even bother to rehearse what I was going to say. By the time I walked through the door, I knew there was no point in sugarcoating it. Chris was going to hear exactly how I felt, and I wasn't leaving until I got answers. The moment I stepped inside, I found him sitting on the couch, controller in hand, headset draped around his neck. He glanced up at me, probably surprised that I'd come home so soon, but he didn't say anything right away. I stood there for a moment, just staring at him, wondering how the man I married, the man I built a life with, could have been so careless. Without even thinking, I launched right in. I told him I knew everything, who Amanda was, the connection they had, the messages they'd exchanged. I told him I wasn't going to sit around playing the fool while he carried on some twisted version of his past right under my nose. At first, he laughed, like I'd just said the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. "The warlord is just a friend," he said, waving it off as if the whole thing was a misunderstanding. But I wasn't having it. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of the notification, the text that had set everything into motion. His face went pale. For a few seconds, he looked genuinely panicked, like a kid caught red-handed with his hand in the cookie jar. He stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I cut him off. I told him I'd spoken to Dan, that I knew Amanda wasn't just a random gaming buddy, and that he needed to stop lying and tell me the truth. That's when his tone shifted. He stopped trying to deflect and started trying to explain. He insisted that nothing physical had happened between them, that they were just friends, and that the babe text was a joke. But to me, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a betrayal. I told him I was done with the excuses. I deserved honesty, and I wasn't going to stand there and listen to him gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. Finally, he admitted it. He confessed that he and Amanda had been talking, about life, about their past, about what could have been. He called it harmless, but to me, it felt anything but harmless. It felt like the emotional equivalent of cheating. He said reconnecting with her had started as a fluke, that she joined his gaming group and they got to talking, and before he knew it, it had become a regular thing. He claimed it wasn't intentional, that he didn't realize how far it had gone until now. But the damage was done. I was still processing what he had said when there was a knock at the door. For a second, we both froze, caught off guard by the sudden interruption. Chris got up to answer it, and when he opened the door, there stood his mother. She looked every bit the part of someone who had come to fix things. She was holding a wrapped gift in her hands, a forced smile on her face as she walked in without waiting for an invitation. She didn't waste any time. "Chris asked me to drop this off yesterday, but I forgot," she said, handing me the box. "I hope it makes up for everything." I stared at her, then at Chris, and then at the gift. Something about the way he shifted nervously on his feet told me this wasn't going to go well. Reluctantly, I opened the box, and when I saw what was inside, I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It was the vintage vinyl I had spent weeks tracking down for his dad. The one I had painstakingly searched for, knowing how much it would mean to him. My first thought was that it had somehow been mixed up, that maybe Chris's mom had wrapped the wrong gift. But when I looked at Chris, his expression told me everything I needed to know. He had taken the gift I'd bought, rewrapped it, and planned to give it back to me. He stammered something about running out of time, and how he thought re-gifting it would make things simpler. Simpler. As if stealing my thoughtful gift and passing it off as his own was anything other than lazy and insulting. His mom's face fell as the realization dawned on her. For the first time, I think she truly understood just how little effort Chris had been putting into everything, not just with me, but with his family, with life in general. She looked mortified, and for once, she didn't rush to defend him. Instead, she quietly excused herself and left, muttering something about giving us space. As soon as the door closed behind her, I broke down. The tears came fast and hard, and there was no stopping them. But they weren't angry tears, they were exhausted, heartbroken tears. I felt like I had hit my limit, like I couldn't hold everything together anymore. Chris just stood there, looking stunned, like he didn't know what to do. And then, to my surprise, he sat down next to me and started crying too. He apologized, really apologized, for everything. For taking me for granted, for being so disconnected, for the way he had handled not just Christmas but our entire relationship lately. He said he'd been feeling overwhelmed with work, that he had been escaping into gaming instead of dealing with his emotions, and that reconnecting with Amanda had been a distraction he now deeply regretted. He said it hadn't been fair to me, that I didn't deserve any of it, and that he wanted to fix things. For the first time in what felt like forever, we had an honest conversation. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. But it was real. I told him how much he had hurt me, how I felt invisible, like I was always the one carrying the weight of our relationship while he coasted by. I told him I needed to see real change, not just hear empty promises. He said he understood and that he was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. By the end of the night, I wasn't sure how to feel. I was still angry, still hurt, but also relieved. For the first time, it felt like he was actually present, like he was seeing me and hearing me in a way he hadn't in a long time. I told him I wasn't ready to give up on us yet, but that this was his last chance. Things had to change, and he had to show me that he was willing to put in the work. That night, we heated up the untouched Christmas dinner from the fridge. We sat at the table together, talking quietly about what we wanted our future to look like.